Welcome back to JM Football Week 13 Power Rankings. My name is Justin Penik. Dalton Philly is always along for the ride, and we got some Power Rankings. We got 32 teams to talk about, and we're going to rank them 1 from 32. You know the drill. Dalton, let's start off with Caleb Williams-ville. We got the Panthers at 32, the Patriots at 31. Oh, the Chicago Bears are at 30. The Commanders are at 29. We're going to make an audible right now, because I don't know if we actually talked about this before we recorded. Are the Bears ahead of the Commanders?
I hate the Bears offense. Like Luke Getsy watching Monday Night Football, there's like 45% of his pass plays calls were either at the line of scrimmage or behind it. So I hate watching that offense. I love Justin Fields, but I hate the play calling. But the Commanders' defense is really bad. So it's like the Bears' defense is good. The Commanders' defense is bad. The Commanders' offense is pretty good. The Bears' offense is bad. So it's like pick your poison. If you want to rank the better offense higher, the better defense higher, have at it. I still think the Bears should be higher because they did beat the Commanders, but I don't know if you play them right now who wins.
I think the Commanders are higher, but I just saw the Bears there being like, oh my God, they just won a disgusting game on Monday Night Football that nobody predicted them to win.
Right.
So I just thought I'd mention that. Hey, look at you, Chicago Bears.
3-1 on primetime this year. How about it? Give them more primetime games.
Who would have thought? Thank you. Next tier.
Shout out Ariana Grande, baby.
I paused. 28, we have the Arizona Cardinals. Our New York Giants are moving up, 27. The New York Jets are at 26. The Tennessee Titans at 25. The Las Vegas Raiders are at 24. We'll move right to the mid-man mutt tier, and I think we have some. Do we have any teams to talk about in the mid-man mutt tier?
We do.
23, we have the Bucks, the Bengals at 22. The Chargers are at 21. The Falcons are at 20. The Saints are at 19. And then we have the Packers are at 18, and the Colts are at 17.
Talking about Green Bay, Thanksgiving versus Detroit, a huge upset in Detroit to beat Detroit 29-22. Jordan Love ties a career high with 3 passing touchdowns in that game. He's been pretty serviceable. Green Bay is starting to look better and better each week. Over the last 4 weeks, Jordan Love, 65% completion percentage, 103 rating, 276 yards per game, 8 touchdowns to 2 picks. Green Bay's 5-6. They're sneaking up in the NFC rankings. Minnesota lost this week. Seattle lost this week. This could be a team that really fights for a wild card spot. I do want to give a shout out to Rashawn Gary.
Yeah.
Rashawn Gary had a phenomenal game on Thanksgiving. He records 3 sacks, and a nice story for him is that he tore his ACL last year in Ford Field. This year, he comes back on Thanksgiving, records 3 sacks, gets a game ball. A fantastic game for him, and what a comeback it's been after signing that big deal earlier in the year.
Yeah, Gary has 9 sacks on the year, I believe, and he's that Packers defense's best player. And this is still a very, very young football team, and this is good. Dalton, even having the little bit of a rough start that the Packers had, a lot of injuries that team suffered too.
Yeah,
it's good for this young team, who is they are the youngest team in the NFL. It's them and the Giants that are the 2 youngest teams in the NFL, with having like an average age of like 25 or 26. And it's good for this team in the months of November, and now we're getting into December here. All right, you have important football coming up. You have games coming up that you have to win, and you're playing your best football at the right time. And man, what I feel like is a missing piece that hasn't been here all year. You just look at what Christian Watson can do. Whether it's with his speed and beating guys down the field, or he's big enough where Jordan Love can really underthrow him the first play of the game. It should have been 6, but Jordan Love really underthrows him that first play of the game. Still is able to go up, jump up, high point that ball, come down the 50-yard catch. You see that they ran like a little bit of an end zone fade on Thanksgiving too to Christian Watson that ends up in a touchdown. It's like the dude's just big, he's fast. And if you can get him more involved, especially when Aaron Jones is, struggling with injuries and A.J. Dillon as the lead back, both A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones are averaging less than 4 yards per carry. So it's not like the running game is really carrying them here. They need to get these young guys involved, and I feel like Christian Watson is the best guy out of all of them. And finally, he had kind of like a breakout game for 2023.
Absolutely. I think a crazy thing is, too, like going into the game, I think Green Bay was such a huge underdog because they're playing Detroit in Detroit. But also the fact they had so many guys out for this game. Aaron Jones, Jair Alexander, Devondre Campbell. Those are like arguably 3 of their best players on the roster, all out. Obviously, Bakhtiari's out. Rudy Ford and Josiah DeGuara, the other tight end. All these guys were out. and they still managed to find a way to kick the crap out of Detroit. I know the score said it was much closer than it was, but at one point, I believe Green Bay was up like 3 scores.
No, that game was it was an ass kick.
And I mean, going back to the potential playoffs, they have Kansas City on Sunday night next week. The Giants, your Giants, Monday Night Football the following week. Tampa Bay, Carolina, Minnesota, Chicago. And it's not the easiest schedule in the world, but it's a pretty favorable schedule looking at it. I think Green Bay at 5-6 could very well sneak into a playoff spot, finishing the year at like 9-8 with this schedule.
I think my New York Giants are going to beat the Green Bay Packers on Monday Night Football. Oh,
I'm shocked you said that.
Tyrod Taylor comes back and just hey,
don't do this. We're not ruining the dream. Tommy DeVito, 2 wins. Tyrod Taylor and Danny Jones combined, 2 wins. Therefore, DeVito, the maniac, let him play.
Playoffs, why not? We're moving to that tier. Are the Rams still in the playoffs? Why not tier? Well, they're at 16. The Vikings are at 15. The Broncos are at 14. The Seahawks at 13. Steelers at 12. Texans at 11. The Bills are at 10.
Yeah, we're still high on the Rams because they just find like they should be better than they are. I think this is going to be the last week they'll probably be there because their record really doesn't indicate that they should be there.
No.
5-6. But again, if they go on a winning streak, they're another team like Green Bay that they're 5-6. They've won 2 in a row. They could be a team.
They're there. Yeah, you know what? I thought their record was worse.
No, they've won 2 in a row. They're 1 game back behind Seattle and Minnesota. And half a game behind Minnesota. They got a shot. They haven't looked. They're not sexy because they're a way different Rams teams than years past, but they're still right there.
The Broncos are the hottest team in the NFL right now.
5-game winning streak. Them and the Eagles. And this is the 10-1 Eagles that they're tied with. This is the first time that the Broncos have had a 5-game winning streak since 2015. And they've beaten some pretty darn good teams during the streak. They beat Green Bay, who's gotten better and better, Kansas City, Buffalo, Minnesota, and Cleveland. Now, obviously, these teams have, like Cleveland didn't have Deshaun Watson at the time. Minnesota, this was Josh Dobbs, Minnesota, not Kirk Cousins, Minnesota. But they're beating teams that are relatively serviceable. It's not like they're beating these Caleb Williams-ville level teams. Broncos versus the Browns. What I thought was really impressive is that Russell Wilson's numbers weren't like attractive. Like they're not like, oh, wow, he had a really good game. But when I was watching that game, he did a really good job avoiding pressure and not taking sacks. He got sacked 1 time, and it was late in the game where it was smart. At that point, like, okay, you're able to take that sack. And then the stat I saw on Twitter, I was like, wow, it's kind of eye-popping. And I know you love rating. Wilson's the second quarterback in Broncos franchise history to have a 5-game winning streak while he's had a passer rating over 90 in each of those 5 games. So he hasn't been playing lights out, but as we said last week, he's been playing very efficiently. He's not causing the Broncos to lose games, and he's doing just enough to help them win games. The Broncos are back in this. They're 6-5. They're just outside the AFC. They're right behind my Indianapolis Colts for that last wild card spot. And they have a shot, man. I mean, I give Sean Payton and this Denver Broncos team credit. After giving up 70 points to Miami in week 3, I think everyone is ready to throw tomatoes at Sean Payton after criticizing Nathaniel Hackett and the comments he had about him. But this has been a crazy turnaround within the season, fighting back into the playoff contention. It's amazing.
Yeah, you mentioned with Russ, and one of the main things I think they're doing right now is they're staying on schedule and they're limiting negative plays. They're not turning over the ball over. They're not taking sacks, and that keeps every drive that you're in alive, right? And especially if they are running the ball well. I mean, that's honestly what they did better than anything against the Cleveland Browns this past week, is that they ran the ball. And you mentioned Russ avoiding pressure and avoiding sacks. Russ is still doing that. Now, it doesn't look as sexy, and it doesn't, we've mentioned the word sexy 4 times this episode. Hello.
Hey, now, I love that you're counting that too. Hey, now.
It doesn't look as like awesome and as thrilling as it used to do in Seattle, but he's still doing it. He's still avoiding pressure at a great rate. And a lot of what it's been, Dalton, is maybe not necessarily chucking it down the field to Tyler Lockett or chucking it down the field to, let's say, like a Cortland Sutton or a Jerry Jeudy. It's resulting in, all right, well, I'm just going to check it down. I mean, Russell Wilson's like leading the NFL right now, and the amount of times and the rate at which he's throwing to receivers that are coming out of the backfield. And if it's what the defense is giving you, then it's what the defense is giving you, and it's keeping a drive alive. Russ is using his legs well. The Broncos are running the ball well. Cortland Sutton's doing what Cortland Sutton does in times in which they need it, and their defense is holding up too. They basically did control. I know at one point it was 14-12, but they basically did control that entire game against the Cleveland Browns, which that's a tough team to really control from start to finish. They got an early lead, and then even when it got late and the game got a little close, they put their, they threw the accelerator down and they took care of business. So Broncos, hottest team in football, doing what they have to do, not doing anything like tremendously, but they're doing what they have to do.
I do want to say one thing. I think they're doing a really good job at, and even to use the word tremendous, their defense has caused a lot of turnovers recently. Over the last 4 games, they have 15 takeaways, almost 4 takeaways per game defensively. They're doing an amazing job. That's their best stretch since 1989. Vance Joseph, again, after giving up 70 points to Miami week 3, to have basically averaged 4 turnovers or causing 4 turnovers per game over their last 4 games, that is a tremendous rate. That is why they're winning these games. And we're seeing it, why they're in contention. This defense has turned it around. Russ is doing his thing. They're running the ball well. They had 2 rushing touchdowns for the first time this year. They're starting to creep into that AFC contention.
Let's talk about the Texans, but I want to talk about the playoffs you better be there tier, because we're going to talk about the Texans and the Jaguars game. Okay. The Browns are at 9. The Jaguars are at 8. The Lions are at 7. The Dolphins are at 6. The Cowboys are at 5. So I wanted to talk about the playoffs you better be there tier, because let's talk about this Jaguars and Texans game. What did you think?
I mean, I even tweeted at it, and some people on Twitter, I know Ari, one of the big NFL accounts on Twitter, talked about the officiating by Clay Martin and that crew, about how it seemed like Texans were getting a little bit gypped. I don't like talking about officiating too much, but I really thought there were some instances where Tank Dell had a couple big plays that were taken away by either a bad call on the field or a bad penalty. There are some ticky-tacky defensive pass interference and holding penalties. All that aside, looking at it from Jaguars versus Texans, not refereeing, Trevor Lawrence played a really good game. Jaguars are now 6-0 away from home, including 2 wins in London, because that's, even though they could be home away, they didn't play in Jacksonville. Lawrence set a career high in expected points added in a game. It's the 4th highest mark of a quarterback this year, so this was a really good game for him. 364 yards.
I have a quiz, because I was going to talk about total EPA. What was his percentile? 100 percentile is oh, this is the best game ever. What was his percentile of total EPA?
Ooh, I have no idea. If I'm gonna throw a stab at here, throw a little dart. I'm gonna say this was 78.
95th.
95th.
95th percentile of total EPA game. And this even includes, he threw an interception in this game too.
Yeah.
Want to know what it was?
What was it?
Almost every time, there was a 3rd and 8 plus, which it felt like every drive, every drive in every series, it felt like the Jaguars were in a 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 13 situation. And that's when they were getting their chunk plays. That's where they were picking up their first downs, is in those situations. And I'll tell you what, EPA loves when you pick up a 12-yard play or a 15-yard play, which, hey, that 15 to 20 yards, those are explosive plays. When you're getting explosive plays on 3rd down, EPA loves that, man. Expected points added. So Trevor Lawrence, that's what made this game specifically for him really masterful, is seeing what he was able to do on 3rd and long, which in my opinion, that is the toughest situation to be effective as an NFL quarterback. When a defense knows exactly what you're going to do and where you need to go and where you need to be with the football. 1st and 10, the playbook's open. 2nd and long, the playbook's open. Even 3rd and short, the playbook's open, right? But 3rd and long, they know you're going to pass, and they know you need to get the ball to a certain spot. So it's very hard to operate. Yeah, Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley even got involved a little bit later in the game. Zay Jones had I believe, an opportunity towards the right sideline in the second half. It might have got called for a DPI. So Trevor Lawrence was masterful on 3rd and long. And even just this game in general, it was just really fun to see these two quarterbacks go back and forth with each other.
But Lawrence over the last 2 weeks has only been sacked one time, and it was when he was running out of bounds when week 11 versus Tennessee. So essentially, the Jacksonville offensive line has not allowed a sack over the last 2 games. And this is when they gave up 5 sacks after they allowed 5 sacks in week 10 versus San Fran. I think one thing to watch with Jacksonville, they're 8-3. Cam Robinson left in the first quarter with a knee injury. He's been placed on the IR. That is something to watch. I believe Walker Little's going to shift from left guard to left tackle. Ezra Cleveland, who they got from Minnesota, he now shifts into that left guard spot. So we're going to see how that plays out for the rest of the season. And then my second thing to watch for Jacksonville, Travis Etienne's a good running back. He had a really good start to the year, but he's kind of cooled off since, and I don't think no one's really talked about it. Over the last 6 games, he's rushed the ball 99 times for 330 yards. That's a 3.3 yards per attempt. That is a horrendous rate. Where we talk about 4 as trying to be that baseline, he's well under that. So I'm curious if that Jacksonville offense can shift from being that one-sided offense passing game with Trevor Lawrence. Can they get Etienne in that running game back? Maybe sprinkle in some more Jamal Agnew again. Or I believe it's Dearness Johnson who's also there.
Is Tank Bigsby still running around back there? Or is he hurt?
Yep. Not Tank Bigsby, you're right. So
they drafted him for a reason. So I've been waiting for them to get Tank Bigsby involved. And, I feel like Travis Etienne is in a pseudo-similar position to what DeAndre Swift was in Detroit. It just seems like they don't love him. Just seems like the Jaguars and Doug Peterson, like they don't love him. And it might have just Etienne has a little bit of a fumble problem, right?
Yeah, and to be fair, real quick, Urban Meyer was the guy who drafted him. It wasn't Doug Peterson.
Yeah, right. So I'm waiting for them to get Tank Bigsby involved. That's a running back that I liked coming out of Auburn. I don't know if he fully fits. Like, I think Etienne does fit them well. What they do, kind of like, spreading out the field a little bit and having that speed guy. And I don't know, Tank Bigsby's not really a speed guy. I think he's a little bit more of a power guy. But still, regardless, excited to see what happens there with Jacksonville. They have a somewhat easy schedule to finish the year, Dalton. They play the Bengals. Monday night, really exciting. They play the Bengals Monday night. That would have been an exciting game. They play the Browns, which, hey, that could be a winnable game. The Ravens, which is really the only tough game that they have for the remainder of their schedule, because then there's the Bucs, the Panthers, and the Titans. So that is a very manageable and easy schedule.
Absolutely.
They do not have the tiebreaker over the Kansas City Chiefs. That's why they are still the 2nd seed. But that game against the Ravens, if the Jaguars continue to take care of business, that possibly could be for a top 2 seed, maybe even the 1st seed.
And no one talks about in the divisional round, like it used to be the 2 teams get the bye, which was important, but the 2nd seed is still important because if you win that wild card game, you then have a home divisional game. Yes. That is still an important aspect of the playoffs. Penik, I do want to call an audible too. There was one thing about this game I wanted to talk about in terms of decision making. We talked about D'Amico Ryans earlier when comparing him to Shane Steichen. Game's on the line. Texans are at a 4th and 12. They have an opportunity to either kick a 58-yard field goal or let C.J. Stroud take one more shot and go for it on 4th and 12. Texans opt to go for a 58-yard field goal with Matt Amendola. They miss it, and he barely misses it. I will say, I was going nuts on why would you not let C.J. Stroud go for it on 4th and 12. Now, maybe if he got a couple more yards earlier.
I mean, you're in Houston, though, and that's an indoor stadium. Now, you know more. You've been tweeting about the Texans kicker situation like it's your job. So maybe you know more about the Texans kicking situation than I do, but it's an indoor stadium. And I mean, you don't get the 4th and 12, then the game's over. I'd rather put the guy, like a kicker making a 58-yard field goal is more doable than a quarterback picking up a 4th and 12 when the game is on the line.
And
right?
I would usually agree with that, but it's not their normal kicker. So Keami Fairbairn's out still. It's Matt Amendola. Matt Amendola coming into this game has never, and I repeat, never made a 50-yard field goal in his career. He had missed one from 50 earlier in the game. He's a career 3 for 13 kicker from 40-plus yards. Not 50, 40-plus yards. That's 23% from 40 or deeper. So I would usually tend to agree that letting the kicker kick in that situation, in terms of if it was like a decent kicker, kick the ball. But this guy has absolutely no right kicking a 58-yarder. Mind you, that was probably the best kick of his career, coming up just short and hitting the post, or the crossbar, excuse me. But, I mean, C.J. Stroud has played unbelievable this year. He puts you in that spot to potentially get into field goal range. Obviously, it stalled. He gets sacked by, I believe, Josh Allen during that drive. But Stroud, again, 304 yards, 26 for 36, 116 rating. He's playing great. Let the rookie ball. I would rather have the games go into C.J. Stroud's hand than Matt Amendola's.
All right, that's fair. I do disagree. Now here's the overall the counterpart. You mentioned that C.J. Stroud took a sack. He took like 2 sacks on that final drive.
Right.
That's one of those things where you're seeing C.J. Stroud play absolute Superman ball of running around, looking for Tank Dell, looking for Nico Collins, looking for whoever.
Yeah.
Running around, and it's so crazy how that was like the bugaboo at Ohio State, is that he didn't do that. and you watch this game versus the Jaguars, and then tell an NFL fan that hasn't watched CJ Stroud this year, be like, yeah, you know the thing that he's doing really well right now? That was the thing that people criticized that he did the worst in college, which is so crazy. But anyway, one of those things that you do need to kind of maybe get into the young man's head. You got to get rid of the ball. In that situation, and in those game-winning drive situations where time is a factor, and timeouts are a factor, and down and distance is such a factor, you cannot take sacks. Nope. And that was the second sack that they took on that drive, and ultimately 58-yard field goal hits the crossbar. If you're 5 yards ahead, then Amendola makes the first 50-yard field goal in his career since Vietnam. So, and the Texans are, at least I think they would have tied up the game, right?
Would have been 24-24, yeah.
Would have tied up the game, would have went to overtime. So that game was really exciting, and we've also gotten a lot of shit for not talking about the Jaguars and not giving the Jaguars their flowers. They won a good game, and Trevor Lawrence looked good, and the offense looked good. This is what we've expected from the Jaguars. I expected, and why we've been poo-pooing the Jaguars, I want to get this off my chest too. I've been poo-pooing the Jaguars because I expected Trevor Lawrence to win MVP this year.
You did.
That has not happened. Trevor Lawrence has not played MVP football this year with the weapons that they do have. None of them are like super alpha number ones. I thought Calvin Ridley could maybe be that. None of them are super alpha number ones. But man, they're all pretty good, and the collection of skill position players that they have there in Jacksonville, including the running backs, they're pretty good. And on paper, they should be a top 5 skill position group in the NFL, and it just hasn't been that this year. It's been kind of like their defense that's been carrying them a little bit, which is good. It's a team game. But Jaguars, we're winning games. They're doing what they got to do. Trevor Lawrence is looking good, playing good football at the right time. Go after a top 2 seed. Beat the Ravens in a couple weeks. Go after a top 2 seed, and we'll continue to give them their flowers. Let's talk about the Cowboys, and I want to mention them very quick because we're probably going to be talking about them as the weeks go on because they have a gauntlet of a schedule. If you want to pull that up, Dalton. Here's my overall thoughts on the Cowboys this past month because we've barely talked about them. They've had a very easy schedule last month, but they are the best team in the NFL right now that is also one of the more quieter teams in the month of November that is also really, really good, playing really, really good offense and really, really good defense, but nobody is really talking about it. And is it because, do we just understand that the month of December for the Dallas Cowboys, things always just fall apart? Is that why nobody is taking this seriously?
And as an NFC East guy that you are, of course, you would bring that up, which makes it even funnier. But yeah, I think the biggest reason is it's A, the Cowboys usually don't play well in the winter, whether it be December or in the playoffs come January. But B, their schedule, they haven't beaten a winning team yet. Like they're the best. They've been playing like the best team in football, but they haven't beaten anyone to prove why they should actually be at that caliber. They've beaten the Giants, the Jets, the Patriots, the Chargers, the Rams, the Giants again, the Panthers, and the Commanders. There's no one team where like, holy cow, that's like a really good win. Like they beat the Chargers, I believe 20-17 on primetime. And at that point in the season, it's like, oh, that's a good win. But they haven't beaten anyone of quality yet. And that's why I think a lot of people like ourselves haven't really been talking about them because like we're not sure yet. They play Seattle, which that's a game they should win handily. I don't think Seattle's that great, especially with Geno being banged up.
No, they've really fallen off, Seattle.
So Seattle, Philly, Buffalo. I think Buffalo could surprise them. Miami, Detroit, and then Washington again. The next 5 games they have, those are quality teams. And I would even consider Seattle still in a quality level, though I think they're better than Seattle. That's not going to be an easy stretch. And granted, they've played really good. They became the first team in NFL history to win each of their first 5 home games by 20-plus points. So they're doing their job. Like, they're not the ones making the schedule. They're playing the teams on their schedule, and they're kicking the shit out of them. That is exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They're averaging 27 points per offensive points per game. It's their best through 11 games since 2007. Wow. The Cowboys are the first team since the 1990 Miami Dolphins to go 10 games without allowing a 100-yard rusher, 100-yard receiver, and 300-yard passer. That was snapped on Thanksgiving by Sam Howell and Curtis Samuel, who had 300 passing yards and 100 receiving yards, respectively, on the dot, which is crazy.
Garbage time.
In garbage time, 45-10. So the Cowboys have been phenomenal. Let's just see how you do in the next couple weeks versus these really good teams. And maybe, who knows, you get back into Lombardi Land.
Yeah, and Tony Romo was right on the broadcast talking about this team needs to play at home. Like, that's why this stretch is so important for the Cowboys in December, because if they can play a game or two, or even go after the number one seed and go after the Philadelphia Eagles, who are being called the worst 10-1 team of all time. I hate that shit. I can't stand that.
Yeah.
But anyway, people calling the Eagles are a bad 10-1 team. Blah 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 blah. It's just so important for the Cowboys to get home field advantage, because if they are genuinely playing better at home, they do have an opportunity to go after the number one seed, beat Philly. And, maybe, if Philly's playing that bad, then they're bound to lose one or two more games for the remainder of their season too, right? And then Dallas can take over that number one seed. And then the playoffs and the NFC goes through Dallas, and that's exactly what they want. Because on paper, man, I think they have one of the best guard tandems in the NFL with Tyler Smith and Zach Martin. Tyrone Smith, knock on wood, it's the month of December, and he's still healthy, and he's playing well. The offense is as explosive as it's ever been. Brandon Cooks is finally getting involved and doing what they thought that he would do when they traded for him. And that defense is incredible. And Deron Bland just, broke the NFL record for most pick sixes in a year. And we're not even in December yet. So this is on paper. This is a team that could go out there and win the Super Bowl. If the Cowboys can look like a consistent good football team in the NFC and in this remainder stretch of games, hey, just because they're the Cowboys and it's December and January, like, I'm fascinated by them every year because they can win a Super Bowl. Every year they can. Right. But it just gets to this time of year, and then they look like a different team, and they are a shell of themselves. And it's every year, and I fall for it every year. And this year I'm trying to keep my expectations honed in, but they're good. They're good.
They're good. I do want to ask a question. You mentioned Deron Bland setting the pick six record, having his fifth in a season. Darius Slay tweeted out after Thanksgiving that Bland is the defensive player of the year, and it should be a lock, no debate. Do you think Bland should be DPOY?
Dude, and this is another argument of sacks are always just going to be more flashier, but Deron Bland is literally putting 7 points up on the board.
Pick sixes are flashy too.
If you want to think about it from a value standpoint, literally when you catch a football on defense and you're putting 7 points up for your team, is more. Hey, sacks are extremely valuable. They're drive killers. They're drive enders. But they don't put 7 points up for your team when you get a sack, and that's what Deron Bland is doing.
I hadn't really thought about Deron Bland being the defensive player of the year for how well he's playing, but we have literally never seen this before.
Never.
And Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Danielle Hunter, Josh Allen, all these pass rushers who are having 11, 12, 13 sack seasons are playing fantastic. And they can get up, even creep up to that 20 range where it becomes a debate. But Deron Bland right now, 5 pick sixes at first time in NFL history. And if he adds to that total, or even just gets a couple more regular interceptions, I think it's really hard to take away Deron Bland's case for Defensive Player of the Year.
He's got to keep it, at least with the interceptions part. How many interceptions does he have on the year?
I believe he has 6.
He's got to add a few more, at least interceptions. Maybe not even pick sixes, because he has the record, and the record, whatever. He's got to add a few more interceptions to be really cement the case. Because, here's what you can argue. We see guys get, in the teens sacks every year. Myles Garrett and TJ Watt, they're going to be fighting for the league lead in sacks every single year for the remainder of their careers, right? So that it's impressive every year, but it's something that we see every year. What Deron Bland is doing, we do not see every year, and if anything, we've never seen it ever before. So maybe that is the argument for Deron Bland Defensive Player of the Year. So that's a good one, Dalton.
I just want to correct myself. Deron Bland's got 7. Geno was the defensive back that has 6 that I was thinking of.
If
Ron Bland's got 7.
If Bland can get to double digits interceptions, I think it's going to be really hard to say no.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Lombardi Land. I don't know how much time we're gonna spend up here. We got to start spending maybe a little bit more time up here. The Chiefs are at 4, the Ravens are at 3, the 49ers are at 2, the Eagles are at 1. We already touched upon the Eagles a little bit. Like, I think it's such bullshit. Oh, they're a bad 10-1 team. They're one of the worst 10-1 teams of all time. Yeah. You know what's contextualized with them being one of the worst 10-1 teams of all time, if you want to go down that route? They're still the most talented team in the NFL. You can't deny that. It's not like we're talking about the Lions or the Browns or even like the Bills or the teams that have roster flaws, which basically there's every team in the NFL. Maybe besides even the 49ers have offensive line flaws. Every other team in the NFL has roster flaws. Besides, at least in my opinion, the Philadelphia Eagles. Where is the weak spot on that roster? Point to the guy on that team. Maybe there's somebody in the secondary. Maybe there's a safety. Maybe there's a linebacker. Point to that guy and be like, that's how we could, attacking that guy is how we could beat the Philadelphia Eagles. Can't do it on the offensive line. Right. Can't. They're the worst 10-1 team of all time. Okay.
Well, I think it's because how they've played recently, and I agree, I do hate that argument too, but Philly's won 4 straight games when trailing at halftime, so they're coming back after the first half and adapting and overcoming to the trailing situation and then winning those games, which is impressive. I don't know if this is a Pennsylvania thing, by the way, but the Eagles have been outgained by 100 yards for the 4th straight game, and they've won all 4 of those games. The Steelers, who were outgained every game earlier in the year until last week, they were winning those games somehow. So
it's a Pennsylvania thing.
Really weird. But I think it's kind of ironic. But yeah, Hurts, they're winning games, and Hurts has thrown a career high 10 picks this year. They have 10 wins. They're 10-1. Hurts has thrown a career high 10 interceptions. But Hurts has been really good on the ground still. He just recorded his 11th career multi-rushing touchdown game, breaking a tie with Cam Newton for the most ever by a Super Bowl era quarterback. Very impressive what Hurts is doing between a mix of the passing game and the running game still. It's so hard to stop that offense for 4 quarters. Like, even if you're stopping them in the first half like they did in the Buffalo game, you can't hold them down for 4 quarters.
Dalton, you mentioned that Jalen Hurts has, 10 interceptions this year?
Yeah.
They're still 9th in overall the amount of explosive pass plays that they've had. And I guarantee you the Eagles are one of those teams that, hey, even though like Houston is leading the league in the raw number of explosive pass plays, but I think the Eagles would be even higher than 9th in explosive pass play rate, just because I think there are other teams that simply do throw the ball more than they do. So I think it comes at a cost, where the interceptions are going to come at a cost of, if you want to be explosive and if you want to produce those big plays, then sometimes interceptions are going to come at a cost. So I don't necessarily view it as a total detriment to that Eagles offense, even though, hey, sometimes it could be. Turning over the ball is not a great thing. So Dalton, that is going to do it this week. We ran a little long this week, but there's a lot to talk about. A lot of things happening. The Ravens look all right without Mark Andrews, and they pass a test. The 49, everybody in Lombardi Land won, and everybody in Lombardi Land still taking care of business. And we'll talk about more of these top playoff teams as time goes on and as the season goes on.
Worried about the Bills. I'm curious to see how they finish up the year, 6-6. They're starting to scare me a little bit.
I don't think they're going to make the playoffs.
I don't know either. I'm a little worried. Josh Allen now 0-6 in OT2. They're giving me Chargery vibes, and I don't mean that in a good way.
But they have the out. They have the out because, dude, their entire team got hurt, like all in one game too. And I think they have an out. They very much have an out of, we had to fire our offensive coordinator. There was instability in season, and a lot of guys on defense. Now, it doesn't have anything to do with the offense. Our offense is still efficient. Our offense is still scoring points. Josh Allen, I thought, had a really tremendous game against the Eagles. I think there was one throw or one moment that our cover one guys that they put on Allen that he made mistakes when Gabe Davis was running towards a pylon. He was running towards that left side late in the game. So, but anyway, I think the Bills have an out, just because so many guys got hurt. And you could see when the Bills started to fall apart is when half of their defense got hurt. that's when they started to fall apart as a team. Where before that, they were in Lombardi Land like every week.
Right.
So
Chiefs, Cowboys, Chargers, Patriots, Dolphins, 5 games remaining. You got to win at least 3.
yeah. All right, Dalton Philly, we will see you next week. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Peace.